Okay, so get ready to journey to a land of magic and, well, darkness, because we're diving deep into the 80s fantasy classic Legend.
Oh, Legend. Now that's a film that really takes you back, doesn't it?
It really does. It's 1985. Fantasy films are kind of finding their footing, and Ridley Scott, fresh off Blade Runner, decides, hey, I'm going to do a fairy tale.
And it's not just any fairy tale. This is Ridley Scott, so you know you're in for a visual treat.
That's an understatement. I mean, those sets, the costumes, it's like stepping into another world, and those creatures.
Don't forget those creatures. Talk about imaginative. You've got unicorns, goblins, and one seriously creepy villain.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of villains, how can we talk about Legend without talking about Tim Curry as Darkness?
Right. I mean, talk about iconic performances.
He's terrifying, but also, like, strangely alluring.
Yeah. It's that voice, that presence, and the makeup. 5 hours in the makeup chair every day, they say,
5 hours. I can't even imagine.
to become this, vision of darkness.
And this was 1985, so we're talking practical effects, people.
Huh.
No CGI magic here.
It's incredible what they accomplish. Those goblins, the way darkness moves, it's all costumes, prosthetics, pure craftsmanship.
It's a good reminder that you don't always need fancy technology to create movie magic. But let's rewind a bit. For those who haven't had the pleasure of experiencing Legend, what's the story in a nutshell?
Okay, so basically you have this young hero, Jack, right?
Right.
And he lives in this idyllic forest,
With unicorns.
of course with unicorns. It's a fairy tale. But this idyllic world is threatened by, well, you guessed it, darkness,
Who wants to, plunge the world into eternal darkness?
as villains do.
Uh,
And darkness has his sights set on capturing a certain unicorn.
Because their horns, like, hold the power of light or something.
Exactly. It's classic good versus evil, but with like unicorns and goblins thrown in for good measure.
And a princess, of course.
Oh, right. We can't forget Princess Lily,
Played by the wonderful Mia Sara.
another iconic performance.
She gets swept up in all this, and it's up to Jack to rescue her and save the world from eternal night. Sounds pretty epic, right?
It's an epic fairy tale, for sure. But what I find really interesting about Legend is that it's not just some, lighthearted romp through the forest. It's actually got some pretty dark and thought-provoking moments.
Totally. And that's what we're going to unpack today. How does Legend, the seemingly simple fairy tale, explore some really complex themes about good and evil, innocence, and the power of storytelling?
It's fascinating how this film can be both like this whimsical fairy tale, but also have these moments of genuine darkness and even like psychological depth.
Speaking of depth, let's talk about the music for a minute, because Legend has not one, but two soundtracks.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which is kind of wild when you think about it.
It's very unusual for a film.
You've got the orchestral score by Jerry Goldsmith, which is very traditional, epic fantasy music.
Very sweeping, very grand.
Exactly. But then you have this other score by Tangerine Dream, which is this very synth-heavy, almost ambient sound.
Yeah, it's like stepping into a different world, or maybe like a different dream.
It's so atmospheric, and depending on where and when you saw Legend, you might have experienced a totally different version of the film musically.
That's wild. I actually didn't know that.
It's true. Some versions have the Goldsmith score, some have the Tangerine Dream score. It makes you wonder how much the music colors your perception of the film. But before we get too deep into analysis, let's have some fun, shall we?
Oh, I like where this is going.
It's time for a little Legend trivia.
Bring it on.
Okay, first question. Who directed this visual masterpiece?
Well, that would be the visionary Ridley Scott, of course,
Yeah,
known for his stunning visuals and, epic storytelling.
correct. 1 point for you. Okay,
Okay.
nice question. Who played the mischievous Goblin Blix?
Ooh, now you're testing my memory. Was it David Bennett?
You got it. David Bennett bringing a touch of humor and mischievous energy to the film. Last question. What was the original runtime of Legend before it went under the editing knife?
Oh, now you're really digging deep.
Mm.
I'm going to say 0.114 minutes.
You are on fire. Yes, the original cut was a whopping 113 minutes. But for its US release, it was trimmed down to a lean 94 minutes.
Quite a difference.
Quite a difference indeed. Now, you might be thinking, okay, cool 80s trivia, but why should I care about a movie made, almost 40 years ago? And that's a fair question.
A fair question.
Mhm.
But Legend is more than just, a nostalgic throwback. It's a film that's had a surprising impact on the fantasy genre and pop culture in general.
Big time. And that's what we're going to uncover today as we journey deeper into the world of Legend.
Get ready for some serious deep dive analysis.
Because we're about to reveal how this 80s fantasy film, with its unicorns and goblins and one seriously scary villain, has left its mark on the world of fantasy and beyond. Okay, so we're back and ready to go deeper into the world of Legend. We've talked about the visuals, the characters, but now I want to dig into those themes we hinted at earlier.
Yeah, because Legend is more than just, like, a pretty picture, right? It's got some serious stuff going on beneath the surface.
Right. It's not just about unicorns and goblins. It's about good versus evil,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's also about innocence and experience, temptation, duality, all that good stuff.
It's like a classic fairy tale, but with, some extra layers of complexity.
Exactly. And one of the things that strikes me is how the film visually represents these themes. Like, think about Jack at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, he's all dressed in white, right?
Yeah.
Blending in with the forest.
Yeah.
Very innocent, very pure.
Exactly. But as he faces challenges, as he confronts darkness, his clothes get darker, dirtier.
Yeah, like he's literally carrying the weight of his experiences.
And his hair, it gets all like wild and unkempt.
It's a really cool visual metaphor for his transformation.
It is. And then there's Lily. We talked about her earlier, but I think it's worth revisiting her character because she's not your typical damsel in distress.
No, she's definitely not.
I mean, yeah, she gets captured by darkness, but she also like challenges him. She's tempted by him.
And she ultimately plays a key role in defeating him.
She's not just a passive victim. She's got agency.
And I think that's what makes her so interesting, especially for a fantasy film from that era.
Totally. It subverts that whole damsel in distress trope that we see so often in these kinds of stories.
Yeah, it's like Legend is playing with those classic fairy tale tropes, but giving them a bit of a twist.
Yeah, speaking of twists, can we talk about that ending? Because, no spoilers, but it's interesting, right?
Oh, the ending. Yeah. It's definitely sparked some debate over the years. Some people love it. Some people find it a bit too, like, simple, maybe even cheesy.
Yeah, I get that. It's definitely a more traditional fairy tale ending after all that darkness and complexity.
Right. But I kind of like it. I think it offers a sense of hope, a return to, a kind of innocence.
Yeah, I can see that. And it ties into those themes of duality that we were talking about earlier, the light and darkness, the good and evil that exist within all of us.
Exactly. It's like even after all that darkness, there's still a possibility for redemption, for a return to light.
And maybe that's the message that Legend is trying to convey, that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, there's always hope.
A nice thought, isn't it?
It is. It's a good reminder, I think, especially in times like these. But okay, we've gone pretty deep into the symbolism and themes of Legend. Now I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the film's technical achievement.
Oh, yeah, we got to talk about the effects. Because, again, this is 1985.
No CGI.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yet they created these incredible creatures, these amazing sets.
The makeup on Tim Curry as Darkness is just mind-blowing.
It's legendary.
And those goblins, so much personality and character in those designs.
It's a testament to the artistry of makeup effects creator Rob Bottin and his team. They did some amazing work.
They really did. And it wasn't easy. I mean, have you heard the stories about how uncomfortable those costumes were? Especially for Tim Curry.
Oh, yeah, I've heard they were like torture devices, basically.
But it's that dedication to the craft, that attention to detail that makes Legend so visually stunning.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about the cinematography.
The way they play with light and shadow, those dreamy, ethereal shots.
It's all so beautiful and atmospheric.
Cinematographer Alex Thompson deserves a lot of credit for creating that visual language.
He really does.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but I think there's still so much more to say about Legend, especially when we start to talk about its lasting impact and legacy.
Right, because Legend, despite its initial mixed reception, has become this cult classic.
And its influence can be seen in so many other films, games, even books.
Yeah, it's like Legend planted these seeds that have grown into this whole forest of fantasy.
So we've talked about like the visual impact of Legend, those stunning visuals, those incredible creature designs, but I think its influence goes way beyond just the aesthetics.
Oh, absolutely. Legend tapped into something, really primal, really archetypal with its story and characters.
Right. It's like it reminded everyone of the power of these classic fairy tale tropes, these universal themes of good versus evil, light and darkness.
Exactly. And it presented those themes in a way that was both familiar, comforting, but also like kind of dangerous, kind of edgy.
And that's what I think makes it so influential. It reminded filmmakers that fantasy could be like visually spectacular and emotionally resonant.
Totally. And that it could tackle these really big, timeless themes in a way that was still entertaining, still engaging.
We've mentioned a few examples already, like Pan's Labyrinth, The Legend of Zelda, but where else do you see Legend's influence popping up?
Oh, everywhere. I mean, think about films like The Lord of the Rings.
Mm,
You can definitely see echoes of legend in those epic landscapes, those fantastical
just
creatures.
totally. The way they use light and shadow, those kind of ethereal, otherworldly settings.
Exactly. And even in more recent films like Frozen, for example. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but think about those ice castles, those snowy landscapes. It's got that same kind of magical, otherworldly feel that legend captured so well.
And it's not just films, video games, comic books, even fashion.
Oh, absolutely. Legend has definitely seeped into the cultural consciousness in a way that few films from that era have.
It's like it planted this seed and it's grown into this whole, like, enchanted forest of inspiration.
I love that analogy.
You.
And it's true. Legend continues to inspire new generations of artists and storytellers.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into Legend, I'm curious to know what's your biggest takeaway from this film? Why do you think it still resonates with people after all these years?
You know, for me, it's that sense of wonder, that feeling of being transported to another world that legend evokes so effortlessly.
Totally. It's like escaping into a dream, but a dream with like real stakes, real emotions.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that no matter how old we get, we never really lose that sense of wonder, that fascination with magic and myth.
I think that's beautifully said. And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. What is it about Legend that speaks to you? Is it the visuals, the music, the story? Or is it something else entirely? Whatever it is, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep those imaginations running wild, and never lose that sense of childlike wonder.
Because that's where the magic happens.
Until next time,